Hello there. A while ago I thought I was probably finished with reviewing video switchers. There are now so many on the market, low-cost devices, mid-range devices, high-end devices. Whatever your taste, whatever your need, there's something to suit. And I thought, well, surely we've seen enough of these now. And then Osee, whose products I have reviewed before, said, would you like to have a look at our new Gostream Duet 8 ISO? And they read me the feature list and I said, actually, that is quite impressive, so I'll have a look at that, and this is the device. Now, before we get properly underway, let me tell you that they have sent me this for free to have a look at. They've not paid me to make the review, they've not told me what to say, they've had no editorial input over the video, and in fact, I don't particularly have a use for this device, so I don't need to keep them sweet to keep sending me stuff, because I'm probably not even going to use this. I will sell it on or something. So, the opinions you're about to hear are my own from having had a look at this. But it is, certainly on the specs at least, an impressive device. And it is called the Gostream, because that's the name they give to these switchers. Duet, because it includes both HDMI and SDI inputs. 8, because it's got 8 input sources. We'll come back to that in a second. And ISO, because if you plug in a suitably fast SSD, you can record isolated feeds of all the inputs as well as the program output. So that alone is quite an impressive feat, but it has many more things to commend it to. First of all, of course, it's nice and small. Like a lot of these little things, very portable. You can take it around with you, plug it into 1 or maybe 2 monitors, or even 3, as you will see if you want to, and you have got yourself a complete live streaming setup. Let's have a quick look round then. On the front, just a slot for an SD card. The SD card provides various functionalities, which we'll come back to. You've got a vent there, you've got a vent there, you've got a fan on the bottom. They have learned since the original Gostream device, which it had vents, but it didn't actually have a fan in it, and it got very hot, and a lot of early users had to put it onto PC cooling mats and things. Well, now it's got the vents, and it has, well, you probably can't see it, but if you peer in there, you can actually see the fan. And if you peer in that end, you can see a jolly large heatsink on the electronics as well. So they've definitely learnt from that early experience. The interesting bit probably comes when you look round the back. Look at that, various inputs and outputs. We start with an actual physical on-off switch. I mean, it's a tiny little switch, but I like a physical on-off switch rather than press and hold, or even some devices not having an on-off switch at all. You just plug them in and they're switched on. So I like that. Then you've got 2 HDMIs and an SDI here. These are outputs. 3 outputs. The output 1 and output 2, you can configure what those show. It can be a program output, it could be any of the inputs, and then the third one is always the multi-view output. So you are spoiled for outputs here in terms of the number and how flexible they are with what they can display. Then you've got inputs, as you can see, BNCs for the SDI inputs, HDMIs for the HDI inputs, and you can see that there are 8 in total, arranged as 4 channels of 2. In other words, the first 4 channels on this can be either SDI or HDMI. They're not 4 HDMIs and 4 SDIs. It's either or, but you do at least have the flexibility of whether you want to plug in long distance SDI cables or cheap and cheerful HDMI cables. Why it therefore has 8 inputs, again, we'll come back to in a minute. There's a lot to get through here. This is probably going to be quite a long video. So that's your inputs there. You've also got 2 USBs here, which are both in and out. For example, you can plug in a webcam to be one of the 8 inputs. You can also plug in here the SSD, solid state drive, to do your ISO recording if you want to. And you can connect to things like OBS or whatever if you want to stream out via OBS instead of using the device's built-in streaming. There's 2 3.5mm audio jacks, but also you'll notice proper XLR audio inputs as well, which can be configured either to be mic level or line level, and when they are mic level you can tell it whether they're a condenser mic, in which case it will supply 48 volts phantom power, or a dynamic mic, and you can adjust the gain quite considerably. Final thing here then is an Ethernet port, which obviously you can run to your router and use that to then stream out to wherever you are streaming to. So that's the inputs and outputs on the back. On the front, very standard if you've ever seen one of these little mixers. You've got a top row of buttons, 1 to 8, which are live outputs to air. So if you want to do direct switching to air, just select whatever output you want from there. If you'd like to do it the old-fashioned broadcast way of previewing your output and then cutting to it with the T-bar, the cut or a preset transition switch, then you can look at your preview output on this set of 8 buttons, and as I say, you've got a T-bar, you've got a cut button which does a direct transition, or you've got an auto button which will do things like a mix or a wipe or dissolve or fade to black and that kind of thing to do your transitions. You've also got down here some teeny tiny buttons which are extra sources as well. So you've not only got the 8 here, you've also got 2 buttons called MP1 and MP2, which stands for Media Player 1 and Media Player 2. This is bad naming, I think, because you'd think Media Player was going to be how you play videos or something. No, Media Player on this device is stills or a web browser source. I think that's the configuration there. There may be a third one. I'll have to come back to that when I switch the thing on and show you. You've also got supersource, which is terrifically impressive on this, because you can have 4 inputs simultaneously on screen, plus a still background image, and if you really want to go wild, you can use the 3 keys to do keying on top of that as well. I've had 7 things on the screen at once running, and it only limited at 7 because I ran out of things to display, and it was displaying them all simultaneously. I mean, that's a bit of a mad example, but you can do it. It has an 8-layer assembler device thing that will put things together, so you can have all sorts of things on screen at the same time. So supersource and your MP1, MP2. Now, if you do want to play back videos, it can do that. It has, very usefully, 2 channels of video playback. They're here, P1 and P2, and you assign them to inputs 5 and 6. It's a little bit precise. 1 to 4 is your HDMIs or your SDIs. 5 and 6 are your media players, or I think they can be NDI. I forget the exact specifics because the 5 to 8 all have varying combinations of what you can assign the inputs to. I'll have to show you that in a second when I plug it in. So 5 and 6 can be your media players, and then 7 and 8 can be a webcam or, and this is where it gets very nerdy and technical, an SRT pull or receive stream or an RTMP pull stream. It's a little bit beyond me, but it means you can have remote contributors from around the world effectively dialing in via RTMP and appearing as a source on this device. So not just your local studio you can use this for, you can have contributors from around the world. And of course you can assign all of these to be within things like the supersource. So you know the classic news thing where you have news head here saying, well, let's go and talk to our reporter in the field. And then you can have 3 other inputs on the supersource, 4 in total. And that can be your reporter in Washington, your reporter in Shanghai, and your reporter in goodness knows where elsewhere, if you want to configure everything that way. Over here, you've got little indicator lights that tell you of the 3 outputs it can send to stream. So you could do Twitch, Facebook and YouTube simultaneously from this, as long as you have suitable output bandwidth from whatever, local area network and Wi-Fi you're connecting into. Not Wi-Fi, it's Ethernet to a router to the internet. So as long as it's got enough bandwidth, you can stream to 3 things simultaneously, and you pre-configure it, and then you press this live button and it just fires off the streams to all those destinations, which, if you've gone into YouTube and said wait for a stream and go live, it will go live. The kind of thing you do with YouTube. Over here, this little set of buttons allows you to configure. You remember I said 2 of these outputs were configurable. Well, you can you press output 1 and then you select which one you want it to be, and you have the choice of all the 8 inputs. Yes, that's right, all the 8 inputs, as well as program and preview. So if you want to toggle what you're looking at on those 2 outputs, you just go program 1 will be preview, output 2 will be input 5. So you've got an immense amount of flexibility for what you're monitoring. That's just what you're monitoring on those outputs. It doesn't disturb the output to program flow, if you like. Then here, you've got a little collection of buttons which are to do with audio. Again, it's very simple. You select the channel you want to adjust. So input 1, mic 1, mic 2. You can turn it on or off. You can select it to audio follows video if it's a video input source. And you can also then adjust the volume of it using the little knob here. So you've got audio mixing facilities. It all shows it on screen as well, which again, I'll come to when I plug it in, as to what the different levels are. Then here, you've got what on the lower spec, the old Gostream models were just macro buttons. You could have, I think it was 6 macro buttons on the old version. Well, now you've got 8. 8? No, 10. Good heavens, 10 macros you can store, but you can also store scenes. Macros are literally a recording of key presses you make, which can include changing anything in the menus or pressing buttons on the keys, and it will store them as a sequence of key presses. So if you want to reenact a certain set of key presses you do, you store them to a macro, and when you want to bring that macro back, you macro, press the button, and it replays that macro and executes those button presses as you're broadcasting. But scenes is similar, but it stores the state, if you like, of how you have the unit configured. So you can store, again, 10 scenes, and you think, well, let's say you've got different clients who do regular broadcasts. You might set the device up a certain way for client 1, you store that in scene 1, client 2, scene 2, and then when you turn up every time you do a broadcast, you just go retrieve scene 1, and the device is set up with the way the supersource is laid out, and all that kind of thing is stored within those scene memories. So it gives you flexibility, both macros which will execute keystrokes and scenes which execute the state of the way the machine is set up. I hope that made sense. Player 1 and Player 2 I told you about were videos. You press and hold them, it brings up a list of videos off the SD card and you can select to play those. You've also got a toggle button here called multi-view, which changes the way that the multi-view is shown on screen. Now, there's so many inputs and configurations, it all gets a bit squished, and so they made it that you could toggle between different layouts. I swear, in the latest version of the firmware, they seem to have changed the way the multi-view layouts are showing, and I don't think it's as good as the old one. I've literally only loaded that this morning, and I looked at it and thought, well, that's not like it used to be, so I need to drop them an email about that, because I don't think it's as good as it used to be. The one thing I will say for Osee, and maybe it's because they sent me an early review sample, they've been very responsive to listening to me either making suggestions for how I'd like it to work or reporting any bugs, because yes, we're up to version 1.0.4 on the firmware. There have been bugs. There are still things that I think could work better, but they do seem to be quite responsive about wanting to iron the bugs out, so they will listen to feedback. You've got a menu button here. Press that. Brings up all the menus. You can configure pretty much the entire thing within the device by pressing menu, turning this knob and clicking it and clicking. It's fiddly, but you can do it. With one exception, which is as of this new firmware. It used to be you could preload certain things on the SD card, addresses for things like the RTMP sources and the SRT sources that you wanted to connect to, and you could load them in through the menus. In the latest version of the firmware, they've taken that out, and you can only now do that function by connecting a PC to this and using the Osee PC software to control it. I don't know why. I mean, I know it's fiddly preloading an SD card and mucking about with these controls, but why take away an option of functionality? It now means that if you want to configure this on the fly, you've got to take a laptop or something with you as well. Whereas before, you could just have everything that you might ever want stored on the SD card and load it up using the knob. I am going to drop them another email and say, kindly bring back this functionality, because if I were taking this, would want to travel light and just take this. And yes, deal with configuring it through twiddling the button and whatever. I know it's more convenient to use a PC sometimes, but have that as an option, sure, but give us the option to load stuff up off the button like it used to be able to do. It's very strange. Now, I'm really getting to the end of these. Here you've got 2 rows of 3 buttons, which are keyers, effectively. You've got 2 downstream keyers and 1 upstream keyer. So typically you'd use the upstream keyer for a green screen, something like this, so you could key that out and put a background behind you, and then 2 downstream keyers, which you might put like a logo over for whatever channel you're broadcasting on, or conceivably some sort of lower third graphics, because you can configure this to bring in one of the sources and then key it as a downstream key to give you lower thirds. It's a little bit convoluted, but once you get used to it and you've set up your computer and everything and the way you want it, yeah, it's all perfectly feasible. Up here, 3 buttons which are to do with recording to your SSD. You just press ISO if you want it to do ISO recording, or you can just press the record button and it does a program output recording, I think that one is. And then below that, these controls, play, stop, rewind, and a 1 and a 2, refer to the 2 video players, so you can stop, rewind and play the videos that you've selected on the P1 and P2 buttons by using these controls here, bearing in mind that they actually appear as inputs on channels 5 and 6. Again, I find this a little bit convoluted because you've got channels 5 and 6 is where the video outputs appear, P1 and P2 is where you select what those video players should be, and then over here are the buttons which actually control the playback. So it's a little bit contorted, but it works. I think once you get used to it, once you've done it a few times, you would find it satisfactory. Now, as I say, you can control this by plugging in a PC over the USB and then running their software. This is fairly typical that on a Mac you download this thing and then you have to tell it to run, and the Mac, being a Mac, says, "Oh, are you sure you didn't get that from Apple, you know?" And you have to say yes, yes, and override the security controls, and I'm not a big fan of doing that, but it's there. But they've also got a plug-in for the BitFocus Companion, you know, the Stream Deck device. So you run that software on the Stream Deck that then allows the Stream Deck to tell this what to do. So again, you can program different things on the Stream Deck that you don't have the buttons to do here. Options, options, and they keep developing it and they keep updating it and improving it, so I'm sure they will continue doing so. And that is the device. I don't think there's a lot more I can tell you about it like that. What I will do now is plug it in. I'm not going to go through every feature. Clearly, there's loads here. Most of it's fairly standard stuff, you know, just switching between sources and things. But I will show you a couple of bits actually working in practice. Okay, let's switch this thing on then. Switch on the back. The fan briefly whirs up and then turns itself off and then runs in automatic. Basically, if it gets too hot, it'll turn itself on again. The lights flicker across the machine and the multi-view display comes on, showing you inputs 1 to 8, program, preview, and it takes a few seconds more for it to realise it's got some cameras plugged into it, but here we go. It has a little think, and there we have cameras 1, 2, 3. I haven't got anything plugged into 4. 5 and 6 are set up, there we go, as media players. Those are 2 bits of video ready to play back, and I don't have anything set up for 7 and 8. You've got your main program output here, your preview here. Media player 1 gets its own little preview. If you want to preview media player 2, you have to bring it up onto the preview there, and it is currently set, as you can see, to be the Osee website, because you can set up media player 2 to be a browser input. You can also have a look at your supersource there, but it does get its own dedicated preview screen down here. And then on the right, mostly audio information for each of the 8 channels. As I'm talking here, you can see that the levels are flickering, different levels, because it's the different cameras hearing me at different volumes. I've also got a microphone here, which is a condenser mic, and it is 48 volts phantom powered. You can see here we've got 48 volts mic 1, and you can see the levels going there, plus an overall program level. You've got the date and time that it is now, and also when your media players 1 and 2 actually play. In fact, if I start one of them playing, you'll see that you get this little blue bar just starts advancing there, and you also get a countdown timer here, so a bit like being the DJ on your local radio station, sitting there, you know how long you've got until the record ends and you're going to have to do something again. You can also just pause those and reset them. Now, before I do anything else, I'm going to press a button here marked ISO, and it will start recording the inputs to this little Samsung T7 SSD. So you just press ISO, it lights up in red, and now I've configured it so that only inputs 1, 2 and 3, which are the cameras coming into this, are recorded. I'm not wasting time recording the blank inputs, but it's saving them to the hard drive, at least I hope it is. The little blue light is flashing, so we will assume that is all running well and good. So the operation of this thing, pretty much standard. You can directly cut, as I say, by just using these top buttons, and it changes your output directly. You can use the preview screen here to see what you might be about to bring up, and then either do a cut to just bring it up straight away. You can do an auto transition, which will be whatever you've preset. I've got it set to mix here at the moment, but if I set it to wipe and do an auto, it'll do one of those awful things. You can change the pattern of the wipe, by the way. You could equally do a dip to colour, And there we go, lovely, lovely red crossfade there, which is horrible. I'll just go back to mix. Obviously, if you use the T-bar, then you have the complete control over crossing between the two sources like that. So that's all fairly standard. As I have preset my configuration for streaming up to, I think YouTube I set, but you could do 3 sources. Just pressing that live button causes it to go live. I think because I haven't, oh, there we go. Look, it's I think it's trying to configure. It's definitely trying to talk to setting 1. I haven't told YouTube I'm streaming to it, so it may well be getting confused. But in theory, if you've set the YouTube end and you've set this end with the right stream key and so on, then pressing live will make it go live. These buttons I mentioned, you can change what you want the output source to be on the other 2 outputs on the back. I don't have a monitor plugged into those, so there's no point in me changing those. If I select, for example, mic 1 is this mic over here, and by making it light up here, I can both turn it on and off, but I can also change the gain. It's quite hard to see, but here on the screen there's a tiny little value for what gain level you're at. So if I turn that up to max, you can see it's giving me quite a good signal. If I turn it down to all the way minimum, I'm still talking, but obviously the microphone's barely picking anything up. So you can adjust your levels, and once you've finished with that, you just deselect mic 1 and you could select something else, mic 2 if you want to change that one, or input 1 or whatever. Let's say I've got input 5, which I know is my video player, and if I start that playing, I think there is some music on that channel. Yes, you can see from the metering there is some music. I've got input 5 selected, so I could actually turn that down, and you can see the levels have gone right down here of input 5. That music would now be background music as I would continue to talk and address you, the lovely viewer of whatever live broadcast I was doing. I'll deselect that one and no harm come to it. If you want to look at the videos you have got, then you can hold P1 down and it brings up the list of files that are in the video 1 directory on the SD card, and then you can change which one you want. So if we go down to that customer testimonial, you'll see it flickers a bit, and oh, that starts with black. It always confuses me. If I press play, there we go, we can see that that is actually starting to play, and I can pause it and I can rewind it, and again it goes back to black because that particular video starts with black. If I hold down P2, I can look at the videos that are on offer for my second media player. If I go to the end plate here, that one will change, and then if I bring up input 6, I've got that one, which is also playing with some very loud music. So I might go to input 6 and I might choose to turn that down so as to make the background music a bit quieter. You're not hearing it because I'm not actually recording that output at the moment. What else? You've got your keying here. You've got upstream key, which you'd use typically for doing something like green screen behind me. I haven't lit that for doing that, so I'm not going to show you, but I have tried it. It works. As with all things green screen, it takes a bit of finessing. You really need a well-lit, evenly lit green screen. You need separation between the green and you, and you need to fiddle about with the parameters and cut off, and it can all be a bit hit and miss, you know, but you can get there if you've got a good green screen and you can get to a good key. You've also got these 2 downstream keyers, so if I bring one of those up, you can see I've currently set it to be this background still, and if I bring the other one up, it's the website. The Osee website. So if I also brought up as my main source the super source of all the cameras, I've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things on screen. And if I had something else on my key, oh look, there we go, we've got a sixth thing. And of course, if I had the super source set to show all 4 inputs, we would have 7 things running simultaneously on screen at the same time. No idea why you'd want to do that. And of course, a background still image as well. But it can do it. It's really quite a chunky old bit of processor chip they've got in this thing. Super source, there we go, cameras 1, 2 and 3. You go into the menus, there's a load of different templates for the super source, which they call multi-source in the menu and super source on the button. But if you click template, you can then do 2 side by side. Let's do that. There we go, cameras 1 and 2. And if I chose, let's go to that one and confirm. And there we go, we've got a big 1, 2 and 3 there. So there's lots of flexibility, but you don't have to stick with what they've done. If I go back and go into window 1, I could firstly turn window 1 on or off, as you can see here, but if we have it on, you can then change what source it is. There we go. And I could change its position. There we go, move it around a bit. You get the general gist. You could change the size of it. There we go. And you can change some cropping. There we go, I can crop left and crop right. And of course, because you've got the scene buttons that you can save the configuration of the device to, I could now save that into one of the scenes and it would retain that as a preset. I think that's pretty much the gist of what I want to show you, because obviously you can cut between your sources, you can set up, I tell you what, let's do a bit more of this stuff in the menu, because it's worth looking through, because so much of this is configurable through this, except for, as I mentioned, the configuring of the SRT and RTMP inputs. But you can set up your downstream key here. So if I bring that back on air and I change the source of it, you'll see here it's changing. I can make it input any of these inputs. There we go, and that's my downstream key. I mean, normally you'd use a downstream key for something like a logo or whatever, but you can make it any of these. You make it a color, you can make it color bars. It just demonstrates that you can do that. Let's get out of that menu. You can change the transition duration on a mix. You can change the color that you go to on a color, dip to color, and you can change the wipe. So if I, for example, pick a different wipe, let's go with that one, and then I would do a pattern wipe. I've selected. Horrid, isn't it? But the point is, you can do that. It's got a facility, this thing, for auto switching. If you've got camera 1 set on one interviewee, camera 2 set on a second interviewee, and camera 3 set as a wide with all two of them, you can set it so that it automatically changes camera according to the volume, so it works out who's speaking, and you can configure this. For example, audio A, you can set what source it is and what the threshold is for it to trigger. Same with audio B, and then you can also set how you want it. So there's an A and a B and an A plus B, which is the wide shot. I haven't had a lot of success with that, but then there's only me doing the testing, and I've been kind of clicking my fingers next to one mic and clicking my fingers next to another. I haven't really got the setup here to properly test that, but it did switch between them, but it was a bit clunky because I nearly always had enough signal coming through both mics for it not really to know which one it was supposed to be changing to. But it clearly was doing it. I think in a more setup scenario with people in chairs and their own microphones, it would be working much better than I managed to get it. What else have we got here? There's your stream setup. You see you've got the 3 different streams, and you can choose what server you want them to go to. You can upload the stream key for that from the SD card. You can also change the streaming quality, the 3 levels, low, medium, high. That you can also set recording quality to low, medium and high, and it's not necessarily the same as the streaming quality. So if you've got low internet connection, you could set that to low, but if you want to save everything to a hard disk, you could set that to high for better quality later. The media players that play the video, you can decide if they want to stop after they've played a video or loop, or you can actually set them to do a whole list of videos and just play the whole playlist if you like. The one thing, if it stops at the end of a video, it is currently set to go back to the first frame. I would rather, and I've told them this, that it stopped on the last frame of the video. I think jumping back to the beginning, let's say you're doing a conference or something, you play a video, you don't necessarily want it instantly jumping back to the beginning again when it's finished. I'd rather it just freeze framed on the last one, so I've told them that's what I would prefer. I mean, your mileage may vary, obviously. Outputs here, you can change your frame rate. I've got it set to 25 because I'm in the PAL world in the UK, but obviously you can do 30. And then obviously it tells you, oh, I tell you what I do like on this, it was the same as on the previous one. You can change the brightness of these buttons, because by default, if you turn this up to maximum, look how blinding those are. And in a darkened room or even in daylight, that is far too bright. So it's very good. You can turn it right down to 0, or I tend to leave it on 1, and that is a nice subdued button that you can see perfectly well in a darkened room without searing your eyeballs out. And there we go. I think that gives you the gist of it. So you've got your 4 main camera inputs, 2 video player inputs, which can also be SRT or RTMP streams, and 7 and 8 can be webcams or RTMP or SRT streams. It's a lot of inputs, and you've got your supersource, which is 4 things, and you can overlay your keys, which can be picture-in-picture or chroma key or a logo or something. There's a lot of flexibility in this thing, to be fair. It does cost a fair bit more than the previous versions, but it is a fair bit more functionality. I would say this is certainly the most flexible version of a Gostream deck that they've produced. There is also software that you can run it with from a PC, but they've either made it available or they're going to make available a plugin for the Stream Deck, the little thing with the buttons on it, so that you can configure the buttons on the Stream Deck to configure certain things on this. I'm not sure if the plugin for the Stream Deck is yet available at the time of filming this. It may be, I'm not quite sure. They're certainly working on it anyway. They did it for the previous versions of the Gostream deck. I think I've covered everything I want to talk about there and just given a brief flavour of what it can do. Any questions, drop them down below, or there is an Osee Gostream forum on Facebook if you fancy having a look at that as well. Thanks for watching. Cheerio.